Good evening, everybody. I'm News Channel 8 meteorologist Ian Oliver, joining you on a special Saturday evening version of Tracking the Tropics. We just got some new information in from the National Hurricane Center with the 5 o'clock update on Tropical Storm Humberto. So I figured we'd share that with you, talk a little bit about what else is happening in the tropics briefly, and then we'll get going on this Saturday evening. So some good news, thankfully, for the people of the northwestern Bahamas, Grand Bahama, Great Abaco. This system is now moving slowly away from the northern Bahamas. So the tropical storm warning for the northwestern Bahamas has been dropped, thankfully. So some great news for an area still recovering after really being devastated by Hurricane Dorian. A little bit of comparison between these storms in terms of the location and the forecast track. That's essentially where the similarities end with the system. I want to back this up and show you what it looks like on satellite. It's been a lopsided system the last several days. We'll loop this and you can see that. That's the latest information from the National Hurricane Center. It's motion north-northwest. That's important. At 7 miles per hour. The system had slowed down and even stopped a little bit earlier today. Now it's started that motion off to the north, taking it away from the northwestern Bahamas. They were really spared the worst of this. Just a glancing blow from Humberto, which again is just a middle-of-the-road tropical storm. Nothing like that monster Category 5 hurricane that was Hurricane Dorian. It does have tropical storm force winds that extend out about 140 miles from the center of circulation, but that's primarily in the northeastern quadrant. And you can see as the system passed by the northwestern Bahamas, the worst of the storm did thankfully stay off to the north and east. So they get a little bit of rain, some gusty winds, but that was really the extent of this system. This is the forecast track as we move on into the day tomorrow. And you notice the forecast now, the wind shear that has really been plaguing this system over the last couple of days, that's going to start to let up. So it's motion taking it away from the northwestern Bahamas, eventually off to the north, over 100 miles off to the east, well off to the east of the Florida East Coast. This is outside the track of Hurricane Dorian, thankfully. Then it makes a hard turn off to the right or to the east, heading out towards the open waters of the Atlantic. Just like we saw with Dorian, there's a blocking area of high pressure right now off to the north, but the forecast models are already showing that that area of high pressure is starting to weaken. That's what's going to eventually allow Humberto to make its turn off to the east and then eventually heading out to sea. The only land still threatened by this system, that would be Bermuda, so we'll be watching that as we head towards the middle part of next week. Still the possibility for some high surf, some rip currents along the southeastern coast, but overall, thankfully, as we continue to move on through the rest of the day today, the impacts continue to lessen on the northwestern Bahamas, and then we'll continue to track this system staying offshore of the southeastern United States coastline. These are the forecast models with Humberto, and I mentioned Bermuda. That's an uncomfortably close track with this because the system is forecast to intensify as we move on through the next few days. I'll actually back this up to the forecast cone so you can see that. The latest forecast from the National Hurricane Center actually has this storm reaching Category 2 hurricane status, moving over warm water, and eventually that wind shear that I mentioned that's been really impeding the storm, that lets up. So we're talking about a favorable environment for development, especially once we head into the early part of next week. Monday into Tuesday, you notice that development taking place there, the intensification by Tuesday afternoon. We're talking about a Category 2 storm with maximum winds up to 100 miles per hour, perhaps getting a little bit stronger from there. So the possibility we could even see Humberto becoming a major hurricane, but thankfully at that point, it's already started its motion well off to the east, taking it away from the southeastern coast of the United States. So good trends with Humberto, primarily the dropping of that tropical storm warning for the northwestern Bahamas. Of course, we've been thinking of those folks as they continue to recover from Dorian. Now, I want to show you what else is happening in the tropics. 4 days ago was the peak statistically of the tropical season. So we expect this to be in a very active period. There's a probability of tropical storm force winds. Wanted to show you that real quick, just showing the high probability of that staying well offshore of the east coast of Florida, the southeast coast. We're talking about Georgia, the Carolinas, Bermuda, still the possibility of some impacts from Humberto, and we'll be watching that. Look off to our west now in the central Gulf of Mexico. That actually has been a major player with Humberto over the last few days. That's what's been acting a bunch of wind shear on the system and not allowing it to really organize. That's why if you look at the south side of Humberto, you can see that tropical storm icon. It's really devoid of convection. That wind shear has really pushed the bulk of that activity onto the north side of that center of circulation. You can see that spin off to our west in the Gulf. That is the upper level low. And on the east side of that spin, just off to the west of the Florida Peninsula, a plume of convection, some showers, some thunderstorms that have fired up. National Hurricane Center is actually watching that area, now giving it about a 30% chance of developing into a tropical system, developing at least into a broad area of low pressure over the next day or so, and then longer term, the possibility as that slowly wobbles westward across the warm waters of the Gulf of Mexico that could organize itself into a tropical system. Overall, the forecast models really aren't very impressed with this, but it's still, again, the teeth of tropical season right now, the possibility that this could bring some disturbed weather to the Texas Gulf Coast. That would be as we head on through the next several days. So something we're watching, but not something we're very concerned about. Elsewhere in the tropics, you look way out into the open tropical Atlantic, still over 1,000 miles east of the Lesser Antilles. That's another tropical wave with about a 20% chance of tropical development over the next couple of days, 60% chance, so about a medium probability of this developing into a tropical system. I was just looking at some of the forecast models, the GFS, the European forecast models. Both of them develop this system in some way, shape, or form, but both of them actually have this system recurving and turning north into the open Atlantic before it even comes close to the United States coastline, even in fact some of those turning it before it even reaches the Lesser Antilles. So some great indications, longer range in the forecast models with both of those disturbances. So if you're just joining us, just want to briefly recap, this is the latest, the 5 o'clock advisory from the National Hurricane Center. We're talking about Tropical Storm Humberto. Its motion now has a good northward component, north-northwest, 7 miles per hour. That's taking it away from the northwestern Bahamas, Great Abaco, and Grand Bahama, where the tropical storm warning has now been dropped. Maximum winds with this up to 50 miles per hour, but we are expecting Humberto to really start intensifying in short order over the next couple days, especially Monday and Tuesday as the wind shear acting on the system really lets up and it moves over some very warm sea surface temperatures. That's the forecast from the National Hurricane Center. A motion off to the north-northwest through at least the next 24 hours, 24 to 36 hours. Then we're going to see that hard turn to the right, thankfully, before it impacts the southeastern coast. Intensifying into a Category 2, perhaps even into a major Category 3 storm, making a close approach to Bermuda by the middle part of next week. We'll be tracking that closely, and from there eventually out into the open Atlantic. So impacts as far as it goes southeastern coastline of the United States, it's just rip currents and high surf. Thankfully, this system is staying well offshore and is not an appreciable threat to land. So if you're watching the broadcast, you're wondering a little bit about our forecast. Locally, we have been tracking some scattered showers, some thunderstorms, much needed rainfall as September, which is typically the last month of the rainy season for the Tampa Bay area, has been very dry so far. Tampa International Airport has only picked up about a ½ inch of rainfall all month so far, and we're close to half done now, a deficit of over 2 inches of rainfall. Some decent shower and storm chances for the second half of the weekend, but wait till you see what we're tracking long term. It is a very dry looking stretch of weather looking towards next week. So I got to put the finishing touches on the forecast and the graphics for our 6 p.m. broadcast coming up on News Channel 8. Hope to join you. Hope you see you at 6 o'clock. And if not, hope you have a great second half to your weekend. That's it for this evening's episode of Tracking the Tropics. Have a good night.
Thank you for watching Tracking the Tropics.